What's up everyone, Vu of Envu Films, back with another video, and today I'll be talking about a new BBC, the new Sigma 28-45 f1.8 DG DN. DN stands for D's nuts, and BBC stands for big black camera lens, so it's BBCL, whatever. And of course, again, as you've seen in my other 3 videos, if you have been subscribing to my channel, which you should and should have been, I am using this microphone all up in my mouth like I'm some tube doucher wannabe podcaster, because this room I'm in, my kitchen and my breakfast table, it's a bunch of reverb up in here. And so that's why I have this whole setup. And of course, the reason why I'm out here instead of inside my office is because it is currently summer vacation, and while my daughter's at summer camp, I am taking care of my son, who will be walking around. Maybe he'll make an appearance and making all these noises, whatever. So before some of you douchebags in the comment section talked about how Sigma sent me this lens for review, no, I actually bought this lens with my own money. Matter of fact, I just took delivery of it. It was literally just delivered to my house about half an hour ago from B&H Photo. And I really want to discuss why my YouTube douchebag ass decided to buy this lens. Maybe it'll help you decide why you would buy this lens, and what I think about it so far. So immediately after opening this lens, what struck me first was that it wasn't as big as I thought it was gonna be. I used to own a Tamron 70-180 lens, and as some of you may know, that lens is big, massive, it's heavy, and this lens is actually around the same size, only a little bit lighter. This is basically 2-pound lens, but for some reason it feels a little bit smaller and lighter than the Tamron. Maybe my memory is just jacked up, but as you can see, it is not a small lens at all. It is big. It's just first, it struck me as not as big as I thought it would be based on just watching reviews and all that. And secondly, it's a well-built lens. It's typical Sigma lens. You know, if anything, it just looks like Sigma 2470 DGDN. DN stands for D's nuts, original Mark 1 with a slight erection. That's what it is, pretty much, just in terms of the way it looks and the size. Other than that, high quality lens. The reasons why someone like me would buy this lens is obvious. I do a lot of wedding filmmaking, documentary type of filmmaking, and having an f1.8 and that extra blurry ass background is going to be advantageous to me in terms of not only just light gathering, but I just like bokeh. I'm a bokeh snob. Right now I'm filming with a 24mm G Master lens f1.4 at f1.4 for no reason other than the fact that I want a lot of bokeh behind my YouTube D-bag talking head shot for no reason at all. So there is that. And I'm the type of dude who would never, ever buy an f4 lens. A lot of dudes always ask me about, oh, what do you think about the 20-70 f4? What do you think about the 16-35 f4? And I always tell them, I think it belongs in the garbage can. Why waste your money on f4 lens? A cell phone gets more bokeh than f4 lens on full frame. Don't get me started with that. So just a quick comparison here in terms of size. Sigma 28-45 DGDN, DN stands for D's nuts, and the Sony 2470 GM Mark II. And as you can see, there's a pretty solid difference between the size of these two lenses. Now, when you do zoom out with the 2470, they become about the same size overall, but the Sigma is obviously still heavier. And to be even more extreme, here we have the Sony 24-50 G lens. And clearly, even when I, in this case, zoom out on the 24-50 G, it is not even close to being the size of the Sigma. With the 24-50 G lens in mind, here are some of the things I think are weaknesses, or what I don't like about the Sigma 28-45 DGDN. DN stands for D's nuts lens. It's because this little lens right here has 4 millimeters on the wide end. It goes to show you how non-Asian I am when it comes to mathematics. And it has 5 millimeters more on the long end. It's 24-50, 28 to 45 size difference. So the only real advantage in this lens is the 1.8. So what the heck is the difference between the 1.8 and the 2.8? Obviously, you're gonna have a lot of light gathering, but if you are going to sacrifice your back carrying a heavier lens and obviously space in your camera bag carrying a big lens, what exactly are you gaining going to 1.8 from f2.8? Well, let's just do a live test right now in this video. Currently filming again on a 24mm G Master lens because I'm a gangster master who likes a lot of floaty bokeh balls. What happens when I put this lens on and then you're gonna go from 24 to 28? Let's take a look see. So this is what we're working with at 28mm f1.8. Obviously, I lost some bokeh because of the f1.4, but I also kind of gained some bokeh because now I'm zoomed in tighter, so you're gonna get a little more compression, which means the bokeh balls in the back should be getting bigger. But also, as you notice with this lens, there's gonna be a lot more cat's eye bokeh, especially in the corners where you start getting some swirling, which the GM GM24 f1.4 does not have. The bokeh is pretty round throughout in that lens. So this is what you're gonna be losing going from the 24 to 28. Pretty big difference in my opinion. I actually have to like lean back a little bit to make sure like my head is not chopped off at the top. But this is the sacrifice you're making really going from let's say a 24 to 70 to this lens. You're gonna lose a lot on the wide end. Obviously, on the telephoto end, you're going to be losing a solid, let me see if my math is correct here, 25 millimeters of reach. Now the benefit of this is, again, it is f1.8. So if you want to get to, let's say, close to 70 millimeters, 45 times 1.5 is what? An additional 22.5 millimeters or something like that. So if you're gonna go into crop mode in any of these new modern cameras, let's say you're shooting with the A7 IV or with the A7 S3, or currently I'm shooting with the ZV-1, can't go into APS-C Crop 4K, but if I switch into APS-C mode using the 28 to 45, I'll get roughly a 67.5 millimeter focal length. And at f1.8, if you use the same crop factor on the aperture, even though it doesn't work for the light gathering, it still works roughly for like the type of bokeh you get. You're gonna get similar bokeh to a 70 millimeter f2.8 when you're using a 45 millimeter f1.8 lens and you are cropping into it to get around 67.5 in APS-C mode. So let's see what the 67.5 at f1.8 looks like. So this should kind of roughly look close to 70 millimeters at f2.8. So again, if you need that extra reach, you go APS-C mode and you get 67.5 at f2.8-ish. So this is what you get if you do that. Take a hard look at that, and then what I'm gonna do is actually show you what 70 millimeters at f2.8 looks like when I switch over to the 24 to 70 GM Mark II and put it at 70 millimeters f2.8 right about now. So here I am at 70 millimeters f2.8, and this is how that looks like on. So now I'm at 70 millimeters f2.8 on full frame on the 24 to 70 GM Mark II, and this is how that shot looks like. And again, it should be comparable to the f1.8 at 45 millimeters cropped in APS-C mode 1.5 times to 67.5 millimeters using the Sigma 2845 DGD, and DN stands for disuss lens at f1.8. So we will sit here and compare those two shots. Again, this is not the exact same shot. I am not a technical, straight scientific ass kind of YouTuber, nor am I a technical shooter when I'm doing client work. I generally just gauge the look and feel of the shot to get my exposure, and with these reviews, it's all about user experience, how I feel about things, using it in the real world. That's how I do things. So again, this is like a rough gauge, rough comparison between the two. So now if we want to compare even further, I'm still using the Sony 2470 GM Mark II. Now let's see what the difference is between using 2.8 versus 1.8. So right now I'm going to zoom in to 28 millimeters, which is as wide as the 28 to 45 DGDN can get. Because I can't tell if this is 28 millimeters or not on the 2470 GM Mark II, I'm going to just go to 35. So I'm going to compare this 35 f2.8 G Master, and then I'm going to compare the 35 on the f1.8 2845 DGDN. DN stands for D's nuts. So now I am at 35 millimeter on the G Master Mark II 24 to 70, and I have been filming on and off with my Freewell mist filter. So right now I do not have the mist filter on the 2470 GM Mark II, and then when I put on the Sigma, I'm also going to not have a mist filter, so you get to see like overall sharpness or whatever if you want to nitpick, pixel peep that. So 35 f2.8 GM Mark II. All right, so now hopefully I gauged it properly. So because, you know, any difference in terms of how close or far I am from the lens, it's gonna make a big difference in the bokeh. So right now I'm on the 28 to 45 DGDN. DN stands for D's nuts at f1.8. And you tell me, do you notice the difference in the background separation between the 28 to 45 versus 2470 GM Mark II at f2.8? Some of you may notice, some of you may not care for the slight difference. I care for the slight difference. And this is probably a more favorable comparison for the 2470 f2.8 because I'm relatively close to the lens, which means there's gonna be more compression, which makes the background more blurry. Now, the reason why I like using primes and, you know, f1.4, f1.8, whatever, is because you get more bokeh at a distance, which means when you are getting full body shots of the subject, you're still gonna get background separation. With a f2.8 or even worse, an f4 AK cell phone lens on your professional camera body, you're gonna get the background and the subject kind of just looking the same. Like they kind of just mix in. There's not as much separation, not as much pop between the subject you're focusing on and the background. Even worse so if you use wider focal lengths. So if you're using like a 70 millimeter at f2.8, half body to full body, you will get a little bit of separation between the subject and the background. But obviously using an f1.8, you're gonna get more separation. But obviously if you're using 24 at f2.8, getting a full body, it's gonna be pretty much a wide angle landscape looking shot for the most part. For me, the advantages of f1.8, f1.4, f1.2, whatever, is getting nice subject to background separation at medium distances. I really appreciate getting full body shots of the subject while also getting a lot of subject separation from the background. I'm gonna zoom back out to 28 here because I don't like being all close to the lens. And I'm gonna put my mist filter back on. Here's the thing, the vast majority of us want like our lenses to be as crispy and sharp as possible. But here's the thing about sharpness. Obviously, when you spend money on a lens, you want to make sure that it is as sharp as possible and all that stuff. But really, we do appreciate a nice, softer look. And that's why I like using mist filters, because it actually helps a lot with the highlights. And it actually helps a lot softening up the highlights. And especially if I just take this mist filter off, there might be a difference in terms of just how technically sharp the image looks to just now with the mist filter, the edge is taken off of these digital, photography lenses on these digital cameras. And I'm currently using just, again, the free will magnetic one at just a 1/8 of an intensity. Before this lens was announced and I heard that Sigma was going to release something like this, I was thinking about it and I was kind of wondering how much it was going to cost. And I was thinking that it would probably cost $1,800, maybe even $1,900, just, to think that it's going to be the first zoom lens that could do f1.8 for full frame. But when it was announced, it was only $1,350, and I say only lightly because it's still expensive. But I think for what it is, what it's able to do, what it's capable of doing, it is very inexpensive. Like $1,350, I thought was a really good price for a lens, of this nature, of this caliber. And so I was like, wow, that's a really good deal. So I said, hey, you know what? I think it's worth a buy, especially after I watched the reviews and I saw that, it was really sharp, it performed really well, autofocus is good and all that stuff. Like, I had no doubts about that. Sigma has been creating great lenses for quite a while now, but my main reservations was obviously the focal range was very limited, 20 to 45. I mean, we're talking about the difference between a 35 and a 45 is literally you moving from here to like here. Now I'm at 35. For me to get the same shot or to me to get the rough composition of a 45 mil at 35, I literally just have to move up like a foot, not even a foot, maybe like 10 inches or so. And I'm here roughly looking like a 45 millimeter shot. And now I'm going to go back to 45 and back up that foot, go to 35. So yeah, it's literally about a foot of difference to get from 35 to a 45 millimeter look, moving closer to the subject. Now, of course, things change as you're zooming in and out, walking, and all that stuff. So being closer at 35 is not exactly going to give you the same exact look as zooming in from that distance to 45 millimeter, because you're going to notice that even though the person might be roughly the same size, as you move closer with your 35 to get that 45 millimeter focal length that you're looking at, you're going to get more background just because of 35 being wider. And lastly, my other reservation here is just the size and weight. I'm a 40-year-old Asian douchebag trash, and my back is starting to hurt after shoots a lot more than it did a year ago, even a lot more than it did 2-3 years ago. I'm getting old, my body's getting worn out from just all those years of lifting weights, playing flag football, all that crap. 8 years worth of filmmaking. It's taking its toll, and at 2 pounds, this lens is no joke, especially after using it for 5, 6, 7, 8 hours. So that's my other reservation. But because of the price, because of the performance, because what it's capable of doing, 28 to 45, as small as it is a very usable range, especially for documentary filmmaking, wedding filmmaking, etc. And the obvious f1.8 and getting that nice f1.8 borderline prime lens look, going from 20 to 45 without ever having to change lenses. It's great, it's versatile, and as a wedding filmmaker, when you decide to shoot prime, as fast paced as a wedding day goes, if you're on a 50 millimeter, if you choose to shoot with a 50 millimeter lens, you're stuck with that focal length. And then there's gonna be times when you see, oh, I really wish I had that 24 millimeter right now, so I get this nice wide shot that I see. You can't. And even let's say you and your second shooter work things out where one has a 24 mil and one has a 50 mil. You can't always have your second shooter, hey, come over here and get this shot. Sometimes you just don't have time, or sometimes the second shooter is focused on getting a different type of shot over there. You notice a nice 24 millimeter shot here, but again, you're stuck with your 50, so you can't do it. Or, you know, you're shooting with your zoom f2.8 and you want to get this nice where you think it would look great, but then you're not quite getting what your eyes are seeing with your lens because it's limited to f2.8, and you just want that extra subject separation. You want that extra dreaminess of an f1.8. You don't have that because you're shooting with the zoom lens. So because you're shooting with an f2.8 zoom, now you're able to get that with this 28. Now you're able to get that with this 2845 f1.8 DG, and DN stands for D's Nuts lens. Anyways, guys, this was not a review of this lens at all. This is just going through my thought process of why I bought a 28-45, and hopefully a lot of the examples that I was doing, a lot of demonstration, and hopefully a lot of the examples and demonstrations I've been doing with this lens this past 20 minutes helped you make a purchase decision. Maybe you want to decide, because obviously the lens is going to give you a great image. It's good quality. It's well made, the whole thing, you know. Hopefully this thing doesn't end up with DG, and DN stands for dusty nuts, like the original 24-70 DG, and DN stands for D's Nuts lens. But I have confidence in Sigma that they're past that, and that this lens will not get nearly or get dusty at all compared, especially since it has an internal zoom. Speaking of internal zoom, if I had a choice between internal zoom and having a smaller lens to pack away than an internal zoom that makes the overall lens just bigger all the time, I actually would rather have the external zoom and be able to pack away the lens, because at the end of the day, that lens is going to spend most of its time in the camera bag and only a short amount of time being used to film with. So I prefer a smaller size. I prefer a lens that can get smaller so I can pack away. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Hope that it was entertaining at least. Please give a like and subscribe. It will greatly help this channel. And until next time, lighten up.
Hey man, what lens is that?
This is a Sony 24-50 f2.8 G lens.
Oh my god, that lens, it's trash.
Why is that?
It's f2.8 made in Vietnam. Trash. If you want to be the best, if you want to be professional, if you want to be award-winning, you need to use the BBC L.
What are you talking about, BBC?
Let me show you. Oh my god, big black camera lens. Sigma 2845 f1.8.
I don't know if my old ass Asian backs can be able to carry around that weight all day.
You go to B&H, they take care of you.
B&H Photo? Aren't they closed for Jewish holiday?
No man. B&H Bit and Whole Phở Nail and Massage. By phở #1 Lakshai with happy ending massage. Only $29.99.